Ladies and gentlemen, let me, on behalf of ERT, wish all of you very welcome to this event. And let me recognize that we have legendary European leaders in the audience here that we much appreciate to be with us at this event. Now, as you know, the ERT is a group of industrialists. We are about 50 chairmen and CEOs who are coming together at least twice a year for plenary discussions, and then we start working groups. And our aim, of course, is to be able to help along the formation of a strong European continent, a single market, and the real advantage of making our own continent as competitive as is ever possible. We are truly passionate Europeans, even though we do represent global companies. Now, let me mention a few data. We represent, and I was going to say even after the crisis, more than 2.5 million jobs across Europe. And with that, with the multiplier effect that is often seen in our types of industries, it actually means that we are probably part of an economic structure in Europe which is more valid at perhaps 5 or 6 million jobs. We have, and that's important to recognize, even industrial companies, we have more than half of our employment in the non-manufacturing area. That's research, that's sales, that's aftermarket, etc. And that, of course, means also that we are often providing very meaningful, high-level jobs around Europe. We are big participants, obviously, in the European markets. Typically, we have 40–50% of our business, our markets, still in Europe. But we do have very large facilities and operations in the US and increasingly so in Asia. But we still have a very big overproportion of R&D in Europe. So much so that we employ about 200,000 researchers in 550 research centers in the EU, equivalent to 11%, I'm told, of all researchers working in the EU, and indeed 28% of all researchers working in business. Now, why did we actually decide on a vision? And it's easy to understand. If you don't know where you're heading, it's difficult to know how to get there. And we have a situation now where in Europe, over time, we have had a good development, and I should say over the last decade. We've now been in the crisis. The crisis has put a lot of question marks on many of the things that we have been able to do and been able to do well. And the world around us is changing at the same time. And we felt that there was indeed a need for a vision, which is far-reaching, further reaching than the European strategy of 2020, and more achievable and more executionable than some of the expressions of visions that have been for some time. As with everything that has to do with vision and strategy, the real key point is execution. I think most of us as Europeans would agree that there was nothing wrong with the Lisbon targets and the ambitions. The trouble was really in the execution, the inability by the member states, but also by the EU in itself. And for that reason, the whole of the EU to really deliver on the promises. Now, at the same time, the world around us is changing very rapidly. And while we are saying that we have a good starting point in Europe and that we like to be much part of Europe, we are also recognizing that the world around us is moving very rapidly. And to some extent, this is really the problem of the whole of what goes on for a long time, that you can actually, even though you are in absolute terms improving our European situation, if the world around us moves quicker, then over time we will become less and less relevant, something that we as European companies certainly would not want to be seen happening. The timing, of course, from a political point of view is not an accident in any way. We have the new commission. We had the opportunity, a delegation from ERT for lunch to meet President Barroso and explain the vision and the introduction of the vision, how we aim to roll it out, which, by the way, includes not only activities on the European level, but also, and very much so, activities on the member states levels, where we feel that in many ways the case of a vision of Europe needs to be made just as strongly at membership level as indeed with the European institutions. In only a few days then we will have a situation where politically we are ready to again address European issues and further foster European development. Now, the whole issue, of course, is how do we execute? And in reality, when one makes a vision or indeed a strategy, then one has to make sure that over time we are actually taking the decisions that we need to make to show progress. So one of the things that we will show later on this afternoon is the fact of how we intend to monitor progress when it comes to making Europe more and more competitive. The structure of the vision that Gerhard Kleistele will soon explain has a very intended structure in that it has the vision in 5 different headlines, then policy direction, and then indeed policy recommendations, which are directly aimed, there are about 50 of those, directly aimed at making sure that we can measure that we are delivering on those recommendations and that we can find ways to do that in a good way. Indeed, there is also quick wins, which are really for the next year or so to look at. And we have the opportunity, again, to follow how that works best. We in business tend to take for granted that the word single market is a good word, is a positive word, something that has delivered good value to corporations and companies, but indeed also for all of European citizens. And we are concerned that there is a integration fatigue in the, and let me say that, in the older generation of Europeans. In the younger generations of Europeans, we feel that they take it for granted. But there is an integration fatigue in the older generation. And one of the points that we will be making here is that the single market needs to be further expanded, not only in goods, but also across services. And just remember the point I just made about more than 50% of jobs created, even in industrial companies, are really service-related. They're not goods-oriented in that sense. We want that single market to be more finely tuned, to be able to define it as a competitive place for European corporations to take and leverage into the world and thereby become competitive in a broader sense. I think there's no one better served at helping us with that argument in the debate than Mario Monti, and we are very happy and pleased that you could be here with us for that purpose. We are also happy to find, we hope, Minister Sebastian, Minister of Industry from Spain, and hear about the Spanish view of the presidency in his aspects of how we can better improve Europe, weather allowing, we should say. We will see how that works. But before we start with the debate and before we start with the passionate discussion about how to make Europe more competitive, let me have Gerhard Kleistele, who has been the chairman of the ERT's competitive working group, and explain the vision in somewhat more detail. Gerhard?